I never imagined being exiled for my pregnancy until a millionaire changed everything. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. My chest ached. I wiped my clammy hands on the sides of my dress, the fabric soaked with sweat. My heart raced, thumping like a drum in a deafening silence. I stood outside the imposing mansion, the massive doors looming like the gates of judgment. This was my last chance. I was Emma, a small-town girl with big dreams that had suddenly turned into nightmares. At 17, I had life figured out. Or so I thought. My family had always been a tight-knit unit. My mother, the rock, trying to hold us together when my father left for another woman. My little brother, Daniel, was my joy. We'd spent countless nights dreaming about our future. Then I found out I was pregnant. The world spun, and everything spiraled out of control. When I told my mom, the silence was deafening. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, turned to disappointment. I wanted to scream, to tell her that this was not just a mistake, but a chance I was ready to take. But instead, it felt like a sharp knife twisted inside me with her every word. "You're ruining your life," she'd said, her voice trembling. What stung even more was the shame that seeped into the cracks of our family like poison. I had become a pariah in my small town. Muffled whispers and judgmental glares chased me down the streets. I was the girl who got pregnant too soon, shunned and exiled. Then came the millionaire, Richard Langston. He had a reputation, a man with a past as murky as the waters he swam in. The night I met him changed everything. I was at the diner, tears blurring my vision over a cup of coffee. He walked in, an aura of confidence about him, startling everyone around. When his eyes met mine, he stopped, as if the world had vanished. "Need a way out?" he asked, his voice smooth like silk. I could barely breathe. I didn't even know him, but I felt a connection, like the air crackled with energy. "Why do you care?" I stammered, suspicion creeping in. He leaned closer, the scent of rich cologne overwhelming. I was an outcast to a ghost of sadness flitted across his features, and for a brief moment, he was human. It was an odd glimmer of hope to cling to in my dark world. I found myself drawn to his off-air, a chance to escape the town, to escape my shame. Would I have to give up everything? My family, my dignity, my baby? The questions tumbled around in my mind, drowning me in uncertainty. But what was the alternative? Stay here? I could almost hear their whispers already, feel the weight of their stares against my skin. Just as I made up my mind, a running figure burst into the diner, panting, eyes wild. "Emma, you need to come home." I froze. Tension hung thick in the air. I glanced back at Richard, whose expression shifted to concern. My heart pounded louder now, the urgency swallowing me whole. Was this about my mother? What had happened? The weight of the decision loomed larger than ever. Stay and face an unknown crisis, or take a leap into the arms of a mysterious millionaire. I took a deep breath, the scent of coffee sharp in my lungs. My fate hung in the balance. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The air was thick with the scent of brewing coffee and fear as I peered into the eyes of the breathless figure before me, Michael, my little brother. His face was pale, the freckles across his nose stark against the flush of panic that paled his cheeks. "Emma, Mom," she collapsed. "We think it's her heart," he gasped, glancing over his shoulder, as if the weight of his words might draw the unwanted attention of judgmental eyes. My heart plummeted. I had always felt like I failed to be strong enough for my family, and now, the thought of losing my mother was suffocating. The diner blurred around me as hysteria clawed at my throat. "What do you mean she collapsed?" My voice trembled, devastated by a cascade of dread. I wanted to reach out to my brother, to throw my arms around him and shield us both from this storm, but I couldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the ground. Richard's expression shifted, a flicker of understanding crossing his features. "Go," he urged quietly. "You don't have to decide now. I'll be here." For a moment, the world around me shrank, reducing to the kindness in his voice, the warmth in those words. Still, I didn't have time to contemplate his sincerity or what this meant for my fragile future. I was outside the diner in seconds, Michael tugging at my sleeve, leading me to my mother. She was arguing with a neighbor. "They said things they shouldn't have. I just knew it made her upset," he said breathlessly, his innocence illuminating the impending disaster. The thought of Mom's pain was like a heavy stone in my chest. Each step closer to home felt like dragging the weight of my despair along with me. When we arrived, the house was shrouded in silence, the door hanging ajar, the faint echo of a siren drifting close. My mother lay on the floor, surrounded by our neighbor, Mrs. Cleary, who tried to hold her head. The sight tethered me between fear and fury. Why did it always have to be the townspeople who judged, who whispered, who pried? They were our friends, or at least, they pretended to be. "Emma," Mrs. Cleary shouted as I stepped inside. "We need to get her to the hospital." "Now." I knew what the words meant. The stakes of everything had risen, and my mother was in a fight all her own. I knelt beside her, feeling the warmth slip away as I took her hand in mine. "Mom, please, stay with us. You're stronger than this." But words began to blur together, and I could only focus on the rhythm of my heart racing, propelling myself into action. The quick arrival of the ambulance seemed both a blessing and a curse. While they took my mother out, fear clawed at my insides. I could hear whispers in the neighborhood, muffing the sirens. Those who had once supported us now exchanged glances laden with judgment as we were loaded into the vehicle. Their gazes pierced through me, igniting the shame I thought was only confined to my pregnancy. "Emma, everything will be all right, I promise," Michael whispered, breaking the tension that had become suffocating. His hand squeezed mine with an innocence that seemed oblivious to life's harsh reality. Inside the hospital, the fluorescent lights glared down like judgmental eyes. I paced the antiseptic halls, my heart pounding in sync with the beeping machines. Michael, once my protector, now wore a mask of tormented worry. His small frame crumpled against the wall as he clutched his backpack. After what felt like a lifetime, the doctor emerged. The weight of his profession draped over him like a shroud. "She's stable, but we need to discuss some lifestyle changes to ensure her ongoing health," he said, his voice serious. I nodded, the numbing reality settling deep within me. The thought of my mother's life hanging in the balance made my decision about Richard feel selfish and fleeting. Here in this sterile environment, facing the prospect of life without her was unbearably heavy. As the doctor continued outlining the changes, a small commotion piqued my curiosity. I turned to see Richard standing just outside the entrance, the sun pouring a soft gold around him. Angry whispers directed at his presence filtered through the hospital walls, but he remained insistent. A quiet strength, the kind I had only seen in brief flashes since I'd met him, radiated from him, even in the face of disdain. He approached, removing the judgmental glares from our vicinity like an invading spirit seeking refuge. "I might not have all the answers, but you don't have to suffer alone. Let me help your family." A flicker of hope stirred within me, but I couldn't yet cling to it. "What about your past? What if this is another mistake?" He didn't flinch, his eyes holding a steadiness I wished I possessed. "Mistakes are part of life, Emma. But you need a different path, a choice that lifts this burden," he insisted. My heart ached somewhere between admiration and apprehension, the gulf between who I was and who I wanted to be stretching impossibly wide. But as I stepped back inside to see my mother again, a pulse of doubt wrapped around me tighter than ever. What if accepting Richard's offer meant abandoning my family? What awaited me in his world if my mother didn't make it? This decision, my future, the choice still lay unfinished. They shimmered like distant stars pinned against a velvet sky. My heart pounded out an unanswered question: could I act bravely, even when everything around me was crumbling? Little did I know, just beyond those impending choices, dangerous secrets loomed in Richard's past, ready to crash into our lives like thunder, changing everything once again. The endless night stretched around me like an eternal shroud, the fluorescent lights rattling my nerves as I watched the minutes blend into hours. My mother lay in her hospital bed, the machines beeping in rhythmic insistencia, stark reminder of the tenuous thread holding her to life. Each sound felt like a heartbeat in the collective weight of our fear, punctuating the silence that engulfed the room, punctured occasionally by whispers of breakthroughs, setbacks, or false alarms. Michael had fallen asleep, his small body curled up in the stiff chair, the burden of worry etched into his freckled face even in slumber. Guilt washed over me. I should have been the one who took that chair, to protect him from this nightmare. Instead, I was standing guard by our mother's bedside, wrapped in a cocoon of despair and decision, whenever my eyes flitted toward the murky window of view that hadn't changed in the hours and days. My mind spiraled back to thoughts of Richard. The unfurling mystery of who he was intertwined itself with our family's growing turmoil, and yet I couldn't shake the tingling feeling that he held some kind of key to change. Or perhaps it was only another splendid illusion threaded with danger. I was lost in thought, recounting every moment we had shared since our meeting at the diner, when a gentle knock at the door jolted me back to the present. I turned to find a nurse walking in, her expression softening the sterile chill of the room. "How is she?" I asked, stepping closer. "She's stable. The doctors are doing everything they can. But the next couple of days will be critical." Her eyes were reassuring, and I held on to her gaze like a lifeline. "Would you like anything? Water? Coffee?" "No. I'm all right." The words came out hollow, but I forced myself to smile. The nurse nodded, as if she understood my struggle, before stepping back into the hallway. As soon as the door clicked shut, I plunged back into my own thoughts. What if this was it? What if my mother's fight was coming to an end? That thought drilled into my chest, expanding and seeping into every crevice of my being. I wanted so badly for Richard's words to be a light amidst this darkness, that somehow I could navigate this mess of existence, but the specter of my mother's mortality loomed larger than my uncertainty. The echo of Michael's stirring brought me back. He blinked awake, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Emma, is Mom okay?" "Yeah, she's stable," I replied, though my throat felt raw. "You should try to rest some more. I can't sleep. I keep thinking." His small voice lost its strength, cracking like fragile glass. What if she doesn't come back? With that, my heart shattered. I rushed to his side and knelt beside him, his little form suddenly so powerful in its anguish. "Michael, she's fighting. You've seen her do that all our lives. Your positivity will help her fight harder." He flashed a tentative smile, but I could see he felt the weight of our shared fear. I could feel it, too, pressing down on my chest. But what if I'm not strong enough? For a fleeting moment, I felt the corners of my world dim under the heaviness of that question. "You are stronger than you think, and so am I." I clutched his hand, and we breathed together, trying to weave a thread of hope amidst the chaos that threatened to swallow us whole. Just as our fragile solace settled in, the door swung open again, this time revealing Richard, his presence illuminating the drab hospital room. "I brought something," he said, a determined glint in his eyes as he entered with a small bouquet of flowers bright and resilient against the sterile backdrop. "Richard, you shouldn't be here," I found myself saying, anticipation and apprehension rushing through me in equal measure. The whispers had followed him, echoing in my ear, the townspeople's disdain creeping back into my thoughts. But he stepped closer, the flower arrangement cradled in his arms. "I want you to know I'm here." "I know," I interrupted, suddenly needing to protect my family from attending rumors or worse, his past. "You need to go." My voice trembled as the words spilled out, torn between my desire for connection and the fear that his world was too rightfully entwined with the darkness I wanted to shield my family from. "Emma, please, just let me show you I'm not a mistake. I've made my share of errors, but I want to help. You don't have to walk this path alone." His words brushed against my heart, igniting warmth amidst chilling fears. Then, the sound of my mother's monitor changed, an alarming beep that pierced the air, spiraling me into panic. "Michael," I called as I turned toward Richard, locked in a bewildering moment I didn't know how to navigate. And as the nurse rushed in, Richard's gaze held my stormy and full of resolve as if he sensed what the present moment escaped to confront. In the chaos of medical urgency, I wrestled with my choices, torn between the looming fate of the woman who had always sheltered us and the connection that felt both thrilling yet dangerous. I knew this turning point would either anchor me down or engulf me. I could sense the darkness behind Richard's past waiting in the wings. As the doctors rushed past us, the door still ajar, I caught sight of whispers moving in the hallway. Someone spotted him, and just like that, our world erupted with uncertainty. What if Richard's past wasn't just his secret to carry? What if, in my decision to embrace him and his offer, it inevitably endangered everything I held dear, with my mother's life hanging by a fragile thread and the weight of future choices crashing over me? I felt the horizon of my reality shifting. The storm was brewing, and I stood at its eye, unaware of how irrevocably everything would change within moments. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the hospital room. The quiet hum of machines stood in stark contrast to the tempest swirling within me. My mother's condition loomed relentlessly in my mind, blending into the unsettling reminder of Richard's presence just outside the door. Michael curled up beside me, lost in dreams, but I could feel his unease radiating off him like a slow-burning fire. I was still riding the adrenaline from the nurses rushing in, each swift movement a frenzied ballet meant to save my mother. Yet, as they worked, I found myself in a disconcerting spiral, thoughts darting between my mother's precarious state and the unsettling energy Richard brought into our lives. I had to choose: protect my family or open myself to a path that could lead us all into uncharted waters. Finally, the chaos subsided, and the doctor emerged from behind the sliding doors, tension written all over his face. "I need to speak with you." He gestured for me to follow him into the corridor, and I caught a glimpse of Richard standing at a distance, his earlier determination now tempered by trepidation. "Is she?" My voice cracked. I swallowed hard. "We've stabilized her for now, but we need to discuss her treatment options." The doctor's tone bore the weight of certainty mingled with lingering uncertainty, and dread pooled in my stomach. "We have a potential donor, but it's a complicated process. I need your consent," and it could mean. As the doctor spoke, my thoughts churned, losing words amidst the free fall of panic. "Donor? My mother can't." The idea of my mother needing something so foreign and fraught with implications twisted my insides. "What are the risks?" he explained, but the details faded into background noise as I began to calculate the unimaginable. What if this choice didn't merely affect our mother, but shifted the balance of everything? My heart raced like a caged animal. "Emma?" Michael's voice interrupted me, creating a small tether to reality as he bounded toward us, his face pale and full of worry, the courage of a boy trying to keep the shards of our world from shattering further. "What do you mean, a donor?" he questioned, his eyes wide and reflecting a myriad of fears. Before I could respond, Richard stepped forward, almost as if propelled by an invisible force. "She deserves a chance," he said simply, his voice steady. A chill sliced through me at the audacity of his intrusion into this moment of vulnerability. "Stay out of this," I snapped, bitterness clawing at my throat. "You don't get to decide." Though his presence unsettled me, I could not deny that part of me craved his support, a strange paradox that twisted deeper into the heart of my anguish. "Emma, he's right," Michael whispered, raw innocence coloring his stance. "Mom deserves everything." I glanced back to Richard, who watched Michael with an expression of somber empathy. In that moment, it wasn't Richard's past that clouded my judgment, but the bravery of my little brother, a bright light against the crushing weight that had fallen on us. "Fine," I gritted out, shooting a look of appraisal toward the doctor. "Let's talk about it, but what does it entail? What are the risks? What can be done?" The doctor laid out the details, and I felt the crushing reality of responsibility wrapping its fingers around my throat as I focused on the implications and possible outcomes. Questions unraveled in my mind. What could this mean for me if I stepped too far into the unknown? Moments turned into what felt like an eternity before we reached a crossroads, a choice that could hinge on hope and despair. I was treading with trepidation, my joints heavy with an unbearable sense of inevitability. When I returned to my mother's room with the weight of the decision looming over us, I met the gaze of both Michael and Richard, two opposing poles I had found myself caught between. Emma, Richard stepped closer, choosing the weight of my turmoil to inject his presence into. No matter what happens, he'll be here. Something in his tone sought to pierce through the walls I had built. And yet that was not the reassurance I needed, nor the comfort I sought in that moment. "Just please," I whispered, feeling tears threatening to spill. "Don't make this harder for us." Outside the realm of coherence, I perceived a shimmer of hope flickering in his eye, the kind that promised change, but also carried within it shadows of consequence. The door opened, and the doctor returned, breaking the tension that thrummed against the air. "We need your decision, Emma." In that electric moment, I glanced between my brother, who wore innocence with hopeful intents, and Richard, whose history posed threads of uncertainty. A rush of conflicting emotions washed over me. What if I make the wrong choice? I felt a strange sort of clarity in my mind, understanding that each choice unfolds a different path, pulsating with potential and peril. Suddenly, an alarming beep echoed throughout the ward, a sound sharper and more ominous than the last, followed by frantic footsteps racing down the corridor. My heart dropped as I grasped Michael's hand, sensing the storm gathering not just over our mother's health, but within the choices I had yet to finish making. As the door swung open again, a flurry of medical personnel rushed past me, their faces grim and intentions all too clear. A fresh wave of panic surged. Then Richard turned to me, his voice low and urgent. "Emma, we can't afford to wait. Trust me, now more than ever." With everything unraveling, that final statement hung heavy between us. The weight of the choices I faced pressed down, and as reality neared an intersection of hope and despair, I felt time stutter. Just as the room began to blur, a shocking realization struck me. What if, amidst this chaos, I could uncover new truths, not just about my mother, but about my family, Richard, and myself? The impending choice loomed like a storm cloud, ominous yet transformative. And with the future hanging in the balance, I prepared to face the turmoil ahead, for I knew that clarity only dawns after the fiercest of tempests. The chaos settled momentarily, air thick with unspoken fears, as the medical team rushed past us. My heart hammered in response, each thud drumming into my thoughts like an anxious warning. I clutched Michael's hand tightly, hoping to channel my trembling uncertainty into the innocence of his small fingers. "Where are they taking Mom?" Michael whispered, his voice barely audible under the tumult of the ward. "I don't know, honey. I just don't know." As the staff whisked my mother away, I felt a gaping void open up in my chest where hope had once nestled. The doctor's earlier words echoed ominously in my mind, merging with the uncertainty that Richard's presence stirred. The confusion churned in my stomach, a toxic cocktail of fear and expectation that threatened to spill over. "Emma, we need to talk." Richard's voice cut through the haze, almost palpably grounding me. He stepped closer, momentarily pushing past the urgency of the hospital toward something more personal. "This isn't just about your mom anymore. It's about us and what your decision will mean for everyone involved." "Don't," I snapped, the ugly edge of my fear spilling out. "This is not about us right now. My mother needs me. I understand that, but you need to understand what this path could mean if you decide to go through with it. There are consequences on either side." His brow furrowed, sincerity woven through his words. "I can't think about that. Not now." I felt the familiar burn of tears in my throat, anger bubbling below the surface. Despite everything, despite the weight of his history and my own, he stood there, an unwavering lighthouse amid my stormy sea. Just as I wrestled with the emotions ricocheting between us, a nurse approached, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos around us. "We need you to fill out some forms, Emma," she said gently, offering papers I could barely focus on. "It's about the donor." I turned, my pulse quickening as the enormity of my task settled upon my shoulders like a leaden cloak. I scanned the papers, but the letters danced, meanings slipping away with the rest of my resolve. "How can I make this choice when I'm terrified of what it could cost us?" "Just breathe," Richard prompted softly, stepping closer, his tone wrapping around me like a warm blanket. "You're not alone in this. Whatever you decide, it'll help you, and for a heartbeat, I let myself lean into the comfort his presence provided, just long enough to suppress the rising tide of despair. But the moment shattered, reality crashing back in as Michael tugged on my sleeve, his expression painted in a blend of childish confusion and budding realization. Emma, what if they make her worse? His eyes were wide, that simple question weighted with complexity. A flicker of understanding collided with the anxiety swirling in the air, the idea that not all choices lead to healing, that paths diverge into darkness as easily as into light. I don't know, buddy, I managed, feeling my protective instincts flare. But we have to trust the doctors. The words sounded hollow, an incantation I hoped would bring forth safety. At that moment, a raucous cry broke through the clinical quiet of the hospital, echoing against the tiled walls. No, let me go. Panic surged through the air as a young woman burst into the corridor, her desperate pleas fracturing the atmosphere. Richard and I exchanged startled glances, our shared concern momentarily binding us. The nurse rushed past us to intercept the newcomer, her professionalism a stark contrast to the chaos erupting at her side. Michael's grip tightened on my hand, a testament to his innocence in the face of such raw desperation. What's happening? He asked, his voice shaking. I don't know, I replied, my heart heavy. Just then, I caught sight of the woman's face pinched with fear, her eyes starting with the arguments of the heart. Please, she pleaded, her voice rising. You can't take him away from me too. The revelation hit me like a sucker punch. She was holding on to something precious, something like the bond one had with my mother. The chaos in that moment pushed past personal turmoil. Reaching into the threads that wove our lives together, what if I was faced with this same anguish? I was already balancing on a precipice of loss. I couldn't imagine exacerbating that pain. The young woman's desperate cries reverberated as the nurse tried to calm her, and somehow it ignited an ember of defiance in my spirit, the strength that had been creeping beneath my resolve. What if I don't want to choose? I whispered to Richard, who was still watching me, concern etched across his features. The simple yet profound question settled over us, heavy with significance. Before he could respond, a voice broke through my inner musings, belonging to the doctor, who reappeared in the doorway, face taut with urgency. Emma, we really need to know how you'd like to proceed. Time is of the essence here. Mom's going to be fine, I declared, punctuating my voice with a fragile hope that felt more like wishful thinking than certainty. She has to be. But beneath that veneer, a tempest of fear roared in response, an air of finality swirled in the shadows of the corridor. Suddenly, I found myself grappling with the tangling threads of uncertainty, the consequences of my decision looming ever closer. And as the nurse and the woman continued their emotional battle, I recognized a truth buried beneath my rising anxiety. Whatever choice I would make, it wouldn't only affect us, it could inevitably reshape our entire story. As the fiery tension enveloped me, the flicker of kindness I had glimpsed, whether in Richard's support or the nurse's compassion, flickered dimly, urging me forward. But then, when hope felt like an anchor I might cling to, I caught Richard's eye just as the doctor issued one last, life-altering statement. Emma, if we don't act soon, we may lose this chance entirely. The gravity of his words wrapped around me, pulling me under, uncertain, suffocating. And in that instant, I understood my choice wouldn't merely define my mother's fate, but would carve paths through the tangled web of reality, forcing the very essence of what I thought I knew into the boiling cauldron of the unknown. The moments seemed to stretch like the silence before a storm. As the doctor's words echoed through the sterile hallway, a suffocating sense of pressure enveloped me. With everything spiraling, my mind danced between the fear of loss and the hope for my mother's recovery. I felt so small, like a child lost in a maze of adult decisions. I can't lose her, I murmured, the weight of the world pressing unforgivingly upon my ribs. My voice shattered the silence, drawing Richard's gaze back to me with a mix of concern and something more. Was it understanding? Or was it fear of a choice I hadn't yet made but already regretted? Emma, he said softly, his hand brushing against mine, grounding me against the tempest that churned within. You have to think about what she would want. What does she believe in? What does that have to do with this? I snapped, the frustration bubbling up, hot and raw. Mom doesn't get to decide what happens to her anymore. She's lying in a hospital bed, and I'm standing here like a coward, paralyzed. You're not a coward. His words carried weight, but they felt like lead. No one can predict the outcome of this. But decisions need to be made, and you shouldn't bear the burden alone. As I looked into Richard's earnest expression, I was struck by how he had among all the chaos become my rock, the person who pushed me to dare to hope, even when hope felt foolish. Michael tugged on my sleeve again, his innocent curiosity cutting through the tension like a knife. "Will they help her?" he asked, his eyes wide in worry. Bitterness twisted in my gut. How could I reassure him when I was engulfed in doubt? "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, summoning the remnants of my voice to weave a tapestry of strength. "They're doing everything they can." Suddenly, a large figure entered the corridor, accompanied by a nervous energy. I recognized the man immediately, an eminent donor to the hospital, a millionaire with connections that rippled through the medical community like a pebble dropped into a pond. Had been at several charity events I attended, always orbiting the center of attention with an air of confidence. As he approached, the air crackled with tension. He was the sort who assumed power came with a frown and a raised brow. While the nurse gently led the young woman away from the chaos, the millionaire seemed to step into its eye with a certainty that repelled me. "What's going on here?" he asked loudly, commanding the space as if it were his. "Sir, please," one of the nurses started, her voice strained yet respectful. "We're handling this situation. I want answers." He interrupted, casting a casual glance at us, as if we were props in his play. "This is my hospital too. My resources should be at the forefront while any of these distractions linger." His eyes flicked dismissively to the distressed young woman who had just been escorted away. My blood boiled. Did he not understand that lives were hanging in the balance? With remnants of the decency I sensed from the nurse and the compassion of Richard, I found the courage to speak. "You're not just managing assets here. These are people, our lives at stake. Respect that. Easy there," he scoffed, his gaze narrowing on me, assessing, belittling. "You might want to reevaluate your tone if you want any help. Power is a trade, and there are people you need to please." A tension-filled silence followed, my heart racing at the audacity of his arrogance. I felt Richard's hand squeeze mine tighter, grounding me amid this strange intersection of power and vulnerability. Just then, my mother's overwhelming presence rushed back into my mind, a flicker of her laughter, her wisdom, the light in her eyes that guided me since childhood. The doctor stepped back into the fray, catching the attention of the billionaire. "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood, we need to focus on patient care rather than politics right now. I suggest we reconvene later." Yet he stood firm, not taking a single step back into humility or concern. "Do what you must. But I'll be watching you. All will learn how to wield power properly or face the consequences." As he turned to leave, a surge of urgency propelled me forward. "Wait!" I called out. To my surprise, the corridor held its breath, the air thickening with palpable silence. "What about making sure that the decisions you choose to support are grounded in humanity, not just in power?" For a fleeting moment, a flicker of surprise crossed Mr. Blackwood's face, like a ripple across tempered glass. But out of that crack in his seemingly impregnable facade, I saw something darker, a wall fortified with layers of silken confidence. And then it returned to indifference as he strode away, leaving an icy draft in his wake. "Emma?" Richard's voice broke through, soft and concerned. That was brave, but all I could feel was a void where courage used to shine. Realizing I wasn't just fighting for my mother, I was reeling against a monster, one shaped by wealth, by influence, and I stood helpless in its shadow. "Mom," I whispered, the reality of my strengths failing me. "I wish I could make you proud." The world outside spun on, but it felt as if time stood still around me, suffocating in the aftermath of our exchange. My heart raced as I looked at the door through which my mother had vanished, nagged by the knowledge that every second brought us closer to a choice that could define our lives forever. And as the chaos continued around us, I noticed the nurse looking towards Richard and me, her expression softening even amidst the storm. "We're fighting for her. Don't lose hope." In that moment, a small seed of resilience began to bloom in the darkest recesses of my heart as I clutched Michael's hand tighter, steeling myself against the whirlpool of anxieties that threatened to drown us. But as the minutes turned into hours, that creeping dread resurfaced. A sudden, insistent text echoed on my phone, illuminating the screen with a chill. It was from an unknown number. "I know something about your mother you need to hear. Meet me outside the hospital. It's urgent." I froze, a fateful choice looming once more, a choice that could either unlock a door to new answers or thrust us deeper into the chaos that surrounded our lives. What awaited me outside, hidden in the shadows of uncertainty? And who would hold the key to this new revelation? The fluorescent lights flickered as I stared at the message on my phone, my heart thumping heavily in my chest. The words twisted and turned in my mind like a knotted thread, unraveling the small semblance of hope I had managed to gather. Who could it be? What could they possibly know about my mother that I didn't? The worry coiled tightly around my mind, and I felt Michael's tiny hand squeeze my fingers, sensing my turmoil. "Are we going to see Mom again?" he asked, his innocent voice cutting through the web of confusion. I knelt down to meet his gaze, searching for the right words, even as uncertainty coursed through me like ice. "Yeah, buddy, we just need to take care of something first," I replied, offering what I hoped was a reassuring smile. In truth, I wasn't sure if what lay ahead was something that would aid us or hurt us more. Richard watched me closely, his brow creased in concern. "Emma, you don't have to go alone. We can face whatever it is together." His loyalty enveloped me like a warm embrace, but I felt an unfamiliar urge to protect him from the unknown, to shield him from whatever darkness was lurking outside the hospital. Tantalizingly close and yet shrouded in mystery. "I need to know what they want," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "If something's wrong, I can't keep pretending everything will be okay." "Okay," he said slowly, his expression shifting from concern to determination. "Then we'll go together." We moved through the hospital corridors, the tension palpable. Each step I took was accompanied by the soft patter of Michael's sneakers against the linoleum, a sound that seemed almost out of place in the midst of such gravity. It was a fleeting reminder of innocence, a stark contrast to the weight of the world I carried. As we exited the swinging doors into the cool evening air, I hesitated for just a moment. In the distance, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow that seemed to promise hope, yet felt too fragile against the backdrop of my unfolding anxiety. I was caught between a coward's caution and the fierce need to uncover the truth. "Over there," Richard pointed subtly, nodding towards a figure leaning against a light post in the dimming light. The person appeared cloaked in shadow, their face obscured by the low brim of a hat. "That must be them." I nodded, hesitating as we walked closer. The stranger lifted their head slightly, revealing a pair of piercing eyes that seemed to assess me with unsettling intensity. My heart raced as I stood before them, caught between fear and an unbearable need for answers. "Emma," they said, their voice smooth yet laced with urgency. "Thank you for coming. Who are you?" I demanded, though my voice quavered, the tremor of vulnerability escaping despite my efforts to appear strong. "What do you know about my mother?" The stranger took a step forward, their breath visible in the coolness of the evening. "I can help you, but you need to trust me. There are things about your mother's past that could change everything for you and for her." "Trust?" I echoed incredulously, my heart pounding with skepticism. "You expect me to trust a stranger who claims to have secrets about my mother?" "That's absurd, Emma," Richard interjected softly, placing a steadying hand on my shoulder, his presence a beacon amid the storm. "Maybe we should listen to what they have to say. Your mother wasn't always the woman you think she is," the stranger continued, their gaze unyielding. "She's tangled in something that goes beyond mere illness. And it's not just about her health, it's about a decision she made that could affect both of you profoundly." Every word spilled out like a jagged shard, each sentence holding weight that threatened to suffocate me in layers of confusion and betrayal. I felt Michael tugging on my sleeve, his face a mixture of concern and fear. "What do you mean?" I breathed, my throat tight. "What did she do?" "Meet me tomorrow night," the stranger insisted, their voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that drew me nearer. "I promise, everything you need to know about your mother, about the choices she May the sacrifices will be laid bare. But tonight, you need to go back. You're not safe here. Not safe? I repeated, my voice a mix of incredulity and fear. What does that mean? But before I could pry further, the stranger backed away into the darkening twilight, merging into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared, leaving nothing but an echo of mystique and countless questions lingering in the chilled air. Emma, what just happened? Richard asked, his brows knitting in confusion. What are we going to do? I looked at Michael, his little fingers gripping mine, trembling as he struggled to process the sudden shift in our reality. I could feel the edges of fear quilted into the fabric of my heart, running side by side with a mischievous thread of curiosity. I was torn, tethered to the ground by worry for my mother, yet pulled towards the tug of unraveling truth. I don't know, I admitted, the uncertainty weighing like stones in my gut. In that moment, I realized that the comfortable illusion of control was slipping away and that this was only the beginning of a tumultuous journey I hadn't sought, but now could not avoid. As we turned to return to the hospital, the weight of the unknown loomed larger than ever. Our lives were intertwined, enmeshed in a reality riddled with choices and secrets that could rewrite our story. But no matter the risk, I felt a rage igniting within me. If my mother had a truth hidden in the shadows, I was determined to bring it to light. But what darkness would spring forth from that light? My heart raced with conflicting emotions as I approached the doors of the hospital, turning to watch the last glimmers of sunlight disappear, swallowed whole by the night. Tomorrow would test everything I had believed about family, loyalty, and love. Would I be strong enough to face the truth, even if it shattered the fragile world I was trying to hold together? And in pursuing answers, would I be able to shield those I loved from whatever darkness lay ahead? With questions like these swirling within, I stepped back into the hospital, each heartbeat drumming a warning that the hardest choices were yet to come. The hospital atmosphere was heavy, saturated with the scent of antiseptic and punctuated by the distant sounds of beeping machines. I felt the familiar weight of my fears wrap around me like a dark cloak as we re-entered the serene chaos of the waiting room, where families clung to each other, hope and dread dancing across their faces. I struggled to mask my racing thoughts while Michael, sensing the undercurrent of unease, clung tightly to my side. "Mommy, is everything going to be okay?" he asked, his voice thin and quivering. My heart twisted at the innocent question, desperate to reassure him despite the tumult of uncertainty inside me. "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Just a little hiccup, that's all. We'll be with your mom soon." Richard stood close, still digesting the strange encounter. "Emma," he said softly as we settled back into our chairs. "What if the stranger really has important information? What if it's something we need to know?" His eyes were earnest, a pleading for understanding and courage woven in. "I know, but it could all be a lie," I muttered, running a hand through my hair in frustration. "What if they're trying to manipulate us? We can't just take the words of a stranger on faith, not when it involves my mother's life." As we waited, the minutes turned into hours, and an unspoken heaviness settled between us. Michael eventually drifted off, his tiny body slumped against me like a gentle weight. The guard I had built in front of my heart was wearing thin, the burden of unanswered questions pressed mercilessly against my chest. When the clock struck 10, I felt an urgent shiver run through me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, my discomfort prickling the back of my neck. My instincts screamed at me, awareness sharpened to a fine point. The hospital was eerily quiet now, the last few visitors trickling out into the night, leaving behind only the looped sounds of the machines. "Emma, I think maybe I should go check in with a nurse," Richard said, standing up to stretch the weariness from his limbs. "Do you want to come with me?" I waved him off. I needed a moment to breathe, to collect myself. "No, I'm okay here. I just need to think." "I'll watch Michael." With a hesitant nod, he moved toward the nurse's station while I settled deeper into my thoughts, the weight of that stranger's words echoing in my mind. Just as I began to scan the room for any sign of the familiar comforting face or whisper of solace, the double doors swung open. A woman hurried in, her hair tousled and eyes wide with distress. As she glanced around the waiting area, She locked eyes with me, one of those intense connections that felt almost magnetic. I couldn't quite place her, but something about her expression was urgently familiar. "Excuse me," she implored, edging closer, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "I'm looking for Emma Hayes." I blinked in surprise. "That's me. Who are you?" "My name is Sarah," she replied, almost stumbling over her words. "I am a friend of your mother's. I know this is strange, I'm not here to hurt you, but we need to talk. It's about the meeting you're having tomorrow. My heartbeat quickened again, the familiar coil of dread wrapping tighter around me. "You know about that, more than you realize." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Your mother was part of something that went wrong, a secret, something big. I've been trying to reach you because the situation is critical, and you may not be safe. Why should I trust you?" I asked, defensiveness flaring. Sarah stumbled, her eyes wide as she absorbed my question, and for a moment, I almost felt pity. "Because I was there when it all went down. I have information that could protect you and your brother. I think you need to know what you're walking into, Emma." Richard returned to my side, his eyebrows shooting up at the sudden tension in the air. "Who's this?" he asked, eyeing Sarah with caution. She started, but I cut her off, deciding I had heard enough for one night. "Come with me," I said, suddenly aware that this woman might have answers, but also a deeper hidden agenda. A small part of me quivered with curiosity, while the greater part yelled at me to stay away from the unknown. "Where are we going?" Richard pressed, uneasy. To find out the truth, that's where. With Michael still nestled in my lap, I stood, the urgency of the moment intertwining with my hesitance. Somehow, this felt like the first genuine step towards uncovering my mother's secrets, a step that would challenge my already fragile resolve. And as I led Sarah cautiously toward a secluded corner, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much, much worse. "Emma, I promise I'm not here to put you in danger," Sarah insisted as we ducked into a quieter hallway. "But I need you to trust me, even if it's hard. Trust." That fragile, elusive thread. I felt its weight again as I faced her, desperate for answers yet terrified of the truth behind them. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the entrance of the hospital, a cacophony of voices and footsteps rushing inside. My heart sank as I recognized the agitation, the unmistakable fear of something terrible. "Emma," Richard shouted, eyes wide as he grabbed my arm. "We need to leave now," but before I could fully process his command, a figure emerged from the crowd, a familiar face cloaked in shadows. The atmosphere thickened with tension as the world around us blurred into a single focus. "Get away from her," the man shouted, eyes ablaze with an energy that sent icy tendrils down my spine. My breath caught as realization washed over me. No, not now. Not when I was so close to the truth. As the chaos unfolded, I could feel the ground shifting beneath me, and I knew in that moment that our entire world was about to shatter once again. The dim light of the corridor flickered, creating an almost surreal atmosphere as fear coursed through me. The panic in Richard's eyes mirrored my own turmoil, but I couldn't quite grasp the urgency behind his words. My heart pounded, not just from the threat looming over me, but also from the weight of Sarah's revelation still swirling in my mind. The figure that had charged through the hospital doors loomed closer. As he came into view, my breath hitched. It was Daniel, the man I had once loved so deeply, the man I believed I had left behind. His presence unleashed a whirlwind of emotions within me, memories that had lain dormant and quiet. Love, betrayal, and the shards of broken trust mixed with the harsh reality I faced now. "Emma, we need to go," Richard urged, yanking my arm again, his grip firm yet searching for my comprehension of the moment. The urgency in his voice broke through my reverie, pulling me back to the chaotic present, but I couldn't help but meet Daniel's piercing gaze, filled with a twisted mixture of desperation and anger. "What are you doing here?" I managed to croak out, my throat tightening as I wrestled with the anger that simmered beneath my surface. "Emma, please, just listen to me," he implored, his voice low but urgent. "I know you don't trust me, but that's not why I'm here. I came to warn you, to protect you." "What are you talking about?" I spat, not realizing Richard was practically dragging me backward now, sensing the rising danger. There's something bigger at play, and it's not just about your mother. He stepped forward, the wild energy in his movements hinting at desperation. I wanted to reach you before it was too late. There are forces out there that want to keep you from learning the truth. Your mother was onto something monumental, and now they're coming for you too. His words, heavy with implications, sent chills through me. Mind racing, I remembered Sarah's cryptic message. The interconnected nature of our fates was spiraling beyond my control. Emma. Richard's voice broke through, his eyes now darting toward the increasing crowd beginning to close in around us. Now is not the time. Panic churned in my chest as fear gripped my insides. If my mom's involved in something dangerous, I need to know, I challenged, defiance taking precedence over my sense of self-preservation. Even as I spoke, trepidation filled me. I had always known there was more to my mother's life than met the eye. Don't you see? They don't just want the truth, they want to bury it into you, Daniel said, his voice steadied with urgency. If they know you're here, there's no telling what they'll do. You have to trust me once more, just this once. I hesitated, the weight of his words settling like stones in my stomach. My memories of him were fraught with betrayal, yet here, entangled in this whirlwind of confusion and fear, he seemed more a protector than a threat. But could I risk it? Suddenly, the hallway seemed to tremble as shadows elongated, figures emerging from the throng at the entry of the hospital, their faces obscured, but their intentions starkly clear. They were closing in, moving with purpose, and in that moment, I felt time stretch and fracture like glass. Let's go. Richard yelled, and I found myself almost instinctively moving forward, the instincts of survival igniting within me. Behind me, Sarah's presence spoke volumes. She may have had answers, yet uncertainty clung to her uncertain expression. Emma, please. Daniel called, thick with emotion as he pleaded with me to turn back, his arm reaching out. I can help protect you, but Richard was leading me away, urgent and aware of the dark tide that ebbed closer. We have to stick together, he shouted, dragging both me and Michael away from the chaos. The weight on my heart became unbearable, torn between two worlds, between the safety of family and the lingering doubts I harbored against Daniel. Before I knew it, we pushed through a door, finding refuge in a dimly lit stairwell. Sounds of commotion fading behind us as we ascended. My mind reeled, rehearsing the dizzying half-truths and guarded secrets that now intertwined with my life and the lives of those I loved. Where do we go from here? I gasped, breathless from the rush and shock still simmering deep within me. Richard and Michael at my side, the bond we shared tightened in silent solidarity even as fear loomed at the edges of our thoughts. We need to get out of here, Richard breathed out, his own emotions tinged with fear and protective fury. We'll find somewhere safe and figure this out, but as we reached the next floor, my heart sank into an abyss of foreboding. The exits we expected up ahead were adorned with bright red warning signs and barricaded by those I had never wished to see again. As we stood locked in stunned silence, I felt the familiar snake of dread curl tightly around my chest. Once more our escape paths blocked, and an unseen enemy poised to strike. Emma, we're trapped, Richard whispered, his voice betraying the resignation of fear. But as the door rattled violently against its frame, the sound of footsteps echoed ominously in the staircase below, dread heavy in the air. I turned, panic threatening to erupt, when a sudden realization hit me hard. I wasn't just caught in a trap, I was standing on the precipice of everything I had ever feared: the truth about my mother, the danger Daniel warned me about, and the uncertain future waiting to consume us all. And just as the door burst open, revealing the figures that stalked through the shadows, a jagged sense of clarity rushed over me. Whether intended or not, I wasn't merely trying to shield the love I felt for my family anymore. I was about to confront a darkness I had never imagined, and the truth might be the only thing standing between survival and what lay ahead. In that heartbeat, everything I once held dear began to unravel, and I realized I was on the edge of a revelation that could change the course of my life forever. What I didn't know, as the shadows closed in, was that this was just the beginning of where the darkness would lead. The gravity of the situation around us crashed down like a tidal wave, relentless and uncompromising. Shadows jutted into the dim light of the stairwell, menacing forms silhouetted against the flickering fluorescence above. My heart thundered in my chest as I clutched Michael's small frame tightly against me, the scent of antiseptic and fear wafting through the air, mingling with my rising anxiety. I turned to Richard just as the door behind us began to rattle ominously. "Emma." His voice was urgent, but before he could say more, the menacing figures pushed through the doorway, their expressions masks of cold intent. Panic rooted me to my spot, yet there was no time for indecision. This was the moment I needed to reclaim everything I had lost, a chance to confront the darkness threatening my family, to protect those I loved. "Run!" I shouted, urgency igniting my voice as adrenaline surged through me. Richard grabbed my arm, determination set on his face as we moved as one unit, battery-energized instinct kicking in. We barreled down the hallway, blood pounding in my ears, the cacophony of footsteps ringing behind us, a dozen chaos-laden hearts racing toward an uncertain end, fighting against invisible demons. "Where do we go?" Michael cried out, worry cracking his voice as he squeezed my hand, his trust and innocence breathtaking yet fragile. I felt the weight of the world in his small fingers, compelling me to push harder, to forge a path against the looming menace. "Anywhere but here," I shouted back, searching every corridor that stretched before us. I glanced at Richard, who kept his eyes set ahead, scanning for an exit while keeping us on course. "There," he shouted, pointing toward a far-off door just beyond the last interrogation of shadows and exit leading to freedom. I pulled Michael close, urging him to keep up as we sprinted toward the promise of safety just ahead. Yet, the air thickened with every pounding footstep behind us, revealing the determination and resolve of those who sought to draw us back into the darkness. My gut twisted as I felt the cold grip of dread clutch at my heart, uncertainty intertwining painfully with instinct as we approached the door. It was a threshold between danger and freedom, hope and despair. The instinct to flee surged within me as I saw the figures closing in, the bitterness of a twisted fate palpable in our every desperate breath. "Emma, get down!" Richard shouted, suddenly halting, pushing us both aside as he dove toward the door ahead. I hadn't registered the glimmer of metal until it sliced through the air, a heartbeat Latera bullet peering narrowly past him and embedding itself into the wall beside us. It shook me to my core, igniting every protective fiber in my being. "Go!" I shouted, the sirens of anxiety ringing in my ears. I pushed Michael ahead, his disbelief mingling with terror, forcing us to bolt through the door as Richard shielded us from the unseen threat. As I burst into blinding daylight, the world around me exploded into vivid color, but I barely had time to savor the air on my face. Desperation struck as I reached for Michael, urging him forward. "What do we do now?" Michael's tiny voice trembled, mirroring the notion of helplessness that echoed within me. I felt the scorching heat of the sun pierce through me as clarity emerged just beyond the horizon. "We figure out what's happening," I said firmly, trying to mask my own faltering thoughts, the illusions of comfort and safety shattering like glass. Suddenly, all the barriers my mother had built began to shudder and crumble, exposing the underbelly of a life I had yet to fully comprehend. Richard emerged behind us, breathless yet sturdy, his determination lighting a fire within me. "We can't stop. We need to get off this property," he urged, scanning the expansive area outside. Just then, as the chaos swirled around us like a cyclone, I saw a vehicle parked slightly off to the side, promising escape, our entry into the world that awaited. I didn't think twice. I pushed Michael towards the car, adrenaline propelling us forward as we bounded. Into the back seat. Richard slid in beside us, slamming the door shut just as another burst of crazed shouts erupted from behind. "Start the car!" I yelled, desperation clawing at my insides while I watched for movement. In a flash, Richard turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life like a furious lion before wailing down the drive and racing away from the looming shadows gaining on us. Each lurch of the vehicle brought us closer to freedom, yet I could hardly breathe. Too many crashing waves of thoughts swirled in my mind, each one threatening to drown me in doubt. What was my mother wrapped within? What was Daniel truly protecting me from? The revelation of secrets entwined with the shadows of our lives felt heavier than any burden I had ever carried. An unsettling silence surrounded us as we sped away, questions emerging from every corner of my consciousness and drowning me in a sea of confusion. Richard turned to me, his face carved from both strength and fear. "Emma, we need to know what we're up against." "I know," I murmured, my fingers trembling. "But how?" In unison, the two of us glanced at Michael, who had fallen silent, his small face twisted into deep contemplation as he absorbed the terror churned up in this whirlwind. With each passing moment, I felt the weight of the decisions multiply, a multitude of twists hurling towards the horizon, a future framing itself on the edge of uncertainty. Then, just as the tumultuous storm within me began to settle, Richard's phone buzzed. He hesitated, the hesitation settling heavy in the air. "What if it's about your mom?" he asked, threading his fingers nervously over the steering wheel. "They might still be watching. Don't answer it," I blurted, my gut churning wildly. "What if it lays a trap for us?" His eyes flicked toward mine, and I could see the torment wrestling within him. Finally, he pressed the screen. "It's from Sarah," he said, furrowing his brow. "She says it's urgent and we must meet her. She has something critical to share that could change everything." My heart raced as Richard continued to read the message, uncertainty gripping me with icy fingers. "Emma, she thinks they're onto you. That you need to know something about your mother, but she may be the only way to access the truth." I locked eyes with Richard, the world rushing past the windows, the sunlight refracting into shards of hope and despair as I weighed his words. Could she hold the answers we so desperately sought? Was she truly an ally in this grim game of secrets? I sensed that diving into this depth without considering the ripples could plunge us into a darkness we had yet to foresee. Not yet. "Let's find somewhere safe first," I decided, the voice of reason muffled by urgency. "We can't risk it until we're away from here." I leaned back into the seat, grappling with the overwhelming thought that I was merely dancing with forces larger than I knew. The car flew down the winding road, and I held on to hope for the day I would understand the truth of my mother's secrets. The connections that bound my family began to unravel, and fears of what lay hidden grew heavier, pressing down on me with each passing mile. But amongst the chaos, a burgeoning resolve began to rise. We were hurtling towards the unknown, and judgment wasn't just waiting, it was catching up. But we would face it head-on, for my mother's voice echoed in my heart, the one filled with strength and conviction. A reminder that sometimes the only path to freedom lies through the labyrinth of choices we've built within the lives of those we love. At that pivotal moment, I made a silent vow, no matter what shadows lay ahead, I would find the strength to forge through them for Michael, for Richard, and for the mother that awaited our salvation. With the darkness trailing us into the unknown, I was ready to confront the truth, for even in the heart of chaos lies the promise of everything we loved. Sometimes, all it takes is a single note of resolve to drown out a symphony of fear. With that thought tilting toward the horizon, I steadied myself against the uncharted. I was prepared for the journey ahead, whatever it may hold. And with each heartbeat, I whispered to the universe, "Bring it on."